Now, what do I want to do? Which toy should I play with? I don't know. Oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. I don't know what to do. Oh my goodness. Jingles, calm down, please, and tell me what's wrong. Lazar, there was a giant mutated monster beast chasing me through the park. Really? A giant mutated monster beast? Yes, it was enormous. It was so fast, too. I barely escaped its sharp claws as I got to your front door. If you had your door locked, I'd be a goner now. Jingles, we've been through this before, many times before. Many, many times before. There are no beasts running around the park trying to eat you. It's all in your mind. I know in the past my fear of the dark has taken hold of my imagination, Lazar. But this time, this monster beast was real. I was walking through the park, minding my own business, when all of a sudden I see these giant eyes staring at me in the distance. In the dark. They were evil, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, I was able to see the true size of this beast. It was twice as big as your house and 4 times as long. It was real, Lazar. It was really real. Jingles, this is what, the 5th time this year we've been through this? Each time I've gone out with you to look for these monsters, only to find nothing out there. No tracks, no fur, no giant beasts of any kind, or any traces of them. You can understand why I'm having such a hard time believing you tonight, can't you? It was real, Lazar. It was. Jingles, I know you don't like the dark. It's a problem we've been working on for a long time. This time last year, you couldn't even go outside in the dark alone. Now, you're able to take long walks at night, alone, and you always feel safe, until you get to the park. Why do you think that is? I don't know, Lazar. Why? Because half the lampposts have burnt-out bulbs in them. In some places, you can't see your hand in front of your face. Jingles, I'm telling you, it's your fear of the dark that's causing you to see these giant monsters. But it looks so real. The mind is a funny thing, Jingles. It can make images and place them right in front of your eyes. They look real to you, but nobody else can see them. This is what happens when we are afraid, Jingles. We tend to imagine things that aren't really there. Here, sit down for a few minutes. I've got a movie to show you. Maybe it can explain what you're going through better than I've been able. Look towards the view screen, Jingles, and learn about your fear of the dark.
Time for you to be asleep, Billy.
I'm not a bit sleepy.
You have to get up early tomorrow, remember?
Oh, I don't want to go to bed yet.
It's bedtime and sleep time. Now, put these things down. Now get under the covers and out with the lights.
Mom, I'm always awake for ages after the lights are out.
Oh, don't worry. You'll fall asleep right away. You'll be asleep before you know it. Good night, Billy.
Good night.
Billy's mother didn't know the real reason why he didn't want to go to bed. When he was left alone in the dark bedroom, Billy became frightened. He didn't understand about fear. that fear is a natural thing and nothing to be ashamed of, and that there's a way to go about getting over some fears. So, he had never told his mother about it.
What is it, Billy? Why aren't you in bed? What's wrong, Billy? Is something the matter?
Mother.
Yes?
Is it all right if I leave the lights on just for tonight?
Oh, is that what's been bothering you?
I thought I saw someone in the room, and I heard noises.
Well, noises always seem louder at night, and then we often imagine all sorts of things that aren't true. Tell me, Billy, are you often afraid like this?
Lots of nights.
Oh, I'm sorry you didn't tell me about this before. You should never be ashamed of telling me when you're afraid of something. Fear is nothing to be ashamed of. Everybody's afraid of something or other. It's very natural. Do you remember what happened a few weeks ago, that Sunday morning? I was making breakfast. You and Dad were waiting so you could get outside to work on the lawn. Do you remember how the bacon fat poured over the stove and caught fire? I was terribly frightened. Your father was frightened, too. Then he remembered an old trick about putting out grease fires, and he quickly smothered the flames. We were all frightened of the fire. It was natural. Being afraid was nature's way of warning us that the fire was dangerous and might harm us. That's what fear is, a warning of danger. Sometimes we're afraid of big things, and sometimes we're afraid of very little ones. But you shouldn't be ashamed of being afraid of something dangerous. No matter whether it's big or little, being afraid is nature's way of reminding us that we should do something to avoid the danger, and to avoid being harmed. Do you remember the time you threw the ball onto the ledge at school? Danny was angry at you for throwing the ball out of bounds and insisted that you get it down. He dared you to climb up the wall on the drain pipe, but it looked too dangerous to you, and you were afraid of losing your grip and falling. So you refused to climb up, even if it was a dare. And the janitor got the ball for you. You see, being afraid of climbing up the wall was your warning that it was very dangerous and that you might be hurt. You showed good common sense when you paid attention to that warning, and you don't have to be ashamed of it. Being afraid was nature's way of getting you to avoid something dangerous. But now there's something else about fear that I don't think you quite understand, Billy.
What's that?
Well, sometimes when you become afraid, there isn't anything that's really dangerous. Sometimes you think things are dangerous when they're not. Sometimes you and most other people grow afraid even when they know there's nothing dangerous. Can you think of anything like that, Billy?
I know. Kathy Lewis used to be afraid of dogs, even when they were friendly. She was so scared she'd cross the street when she saw one.
Well, that's a good example of exactly what I mean.
I found it out one day when I was playing with Scrappy. You know, Mr. Rogers' dog? He's friendly. He wouldn't even hurt a flea. I didn't know she was so fraidy, Cat. I called her to come over, but she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't come back even when I told her the dog wouldn't hurt her. She didn't have to be afraid of the dog. It wouldn't have hurt her. Isn't that what you mean, Mom?
That's just what I mean. And you remember how afraid Keith Hogan was about learning to swim?
That's right. He was scared to go near the water.
Yes. Keith was afraid of something that wouldn't hurt him, too. And there's another kind of being afraid when there's no real danger. That's being afraid of what people might think, especially your parents. Do you remember a few months ago when Mrs. Campbell phoned me after dinner? Frank hadn't been seen since school. They were waiting dinner for him, and poor Mrs. Campbell didn't know what to think. Well, you know what happened. They found Frank down in the basement. His report card had some bad grades on it, And he was afraid of what his mother and father would think. Maybe even that they'd stop loving him. Of course, he found out that he shouldn't have been afraid, that his parents would go on loving him no matter what grades he made. So you can see what I mean when I say there was no real danger there. There are many things that people are afraid of when there's really no danger. Things like fear of being laughed at because their clothes are different or because their marks aren't as good as they might be. They're afraid for all sorts of foolish reasons.
But suppose you are afraid of something, like dogs or the dark. What can you do about it?
Well, each time you're afraid, try to understand whether there's really something to be afraid of. If you're afraid when there's real danger, you can learn ways of protecting yourself. Fear at the right time will make you careful. Fear and wise action, such as Dad took, or such as you took when you wouldn't climb up that wall, you can be proud, not ashamed of.
But how can you tell when there's a real danger or not?
Just stop and think. Common sense will often help. Then, too, try to remember or find out whether other people are afraid of the same things you are. For instance, Kathy could see that you were playing with the dog and that the dog didn't hurt you. She could know from that there was nothing to be afraid of.
That's right.
So what Kathy needed to do was to try to understand why she was afraid of dogs. Maybe just getting to know some dogs would have helped her get over her fears.
That's what she did do, Mom. Her dad bought her a little puppy to play with. It was the cutest little thing. We all loved it, especially Kathy. That was last summer. Her dog's big now. Kathy took good care of him. It got to know dogs so well that she isn't a bit afraid of them anymore. I guess that's what you mean by getting to know and understand the thing you're afraid of.
Yes. Keith got over his fear of the water by taking swimming lessons with a teacher he trusted and believed in.
Yeah, he can swim pretty well now.
There's another thing you can do to help yourself get over a fear when there's no real danger, and that's to talk about your fear with somebody.
Like we're doing now.
That's right. You could talk it over with your parents, friends, your teacher, your doctor, someone you're fond of and trust. If Frank had only talked with his mother and father about his fear that they might stop loving him if his report card wasn't good, it would have been better for them all. Of course, his parents didn't realize he felt that way. Perhaps they expected too much of Frank. And it may sound funny, but Frank's grades were bad partly because of his fear of his parents. He was afraid he couldn't make good. Talking it over certainly made a big difference to the Campbells. It helped all of them understand each other better. As they talked over his work and work habits and what they expected of him, Frank got over his fear of making poor grades and of not doing well enough to please his father and mother. He's doing much better in school now, isn't he?
Yeah. Gee, Mom, it does help a lot to talk things over.
Billy, would you like to talk about some of the things that you're afraid of? Like why you don't like the room dark?
Well, I'm lonesome. And I'm afraid you and Dad aren't downstairs. That maybe you've gone away.
You have my word that we'll never go away without telling you. And of course we'd never leave you alone. Either we or someone else will always be where you can call. How about it? Ready for sleep now?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right, darling. Good night. What about the light, Billy?
Tell you what, Mom. Leave the door open a little instead, will you?
That's fair enough. Good night, son.
He will feel as alone as he did before? Do you think he'll stay awake as long as he used to? Does knowing that others are afraid of real dangers make it easier for Billy to stop worrying about his own fears? And when he remembers that some people are afraid when there's no real danger, does that make it easier for Billy to understand some of his own fears? Billy refused to climb the drain pipe because it looked dangerous. Yet at the same time, he had another fear. He was afraid he might be called a coward by his friends. He had to decide which was the real fear. Do you think he decided correctly? And do you think that the story of Frank's being afraid of what his parents might think helped Billy understand his own fears better? Did it help Billy to talk over his fears with his mother? What do you think?
You see, Jingles, it's all right to be afraid. Fear is a gift we got from nature. It tells us when we're in danger. It tells us when we need to be alert. It tells us when we need to protect ourselves. But sometimes we let this gift get out of control. Fear takes over our lives, and we lose our ability to tell the difference between what we should be afraid of and what we shouldn't. In the end, we end up fearing everything. That is no life to lead, Jingles.
But when we're in the dark and we can't see what is around us, how are we to know what is there and what isn't, Lazar? How are we to not be afraid of what we don't know, can't see, or can't hear?
Yes, there are times like that when you don't have total control of your surroundings. You just have to use common sense at those times. You have to be on guard, just in case something does happen. But don't let your worries grow so much that you are afraid to leave your house alone. The chances of something happening to you, such as being eaten by a giant mutant beast, are very, very small. So don't worry about them.
But how do you control fear, Lazar? That is what my problem is. When I'm out in the dark, I can't help but let my fear control me.
I have another film, Jingles. It talks all about how to control your fears. Look towards the view screen and learn the answer to your question.
Before men learned how to control fire and put it to work, it was man's greatest enemy. In much the same way, your emotions can be your own greatest enemy. Or, under control, your emotions can make you healthier and happier and improve the lives of people around you. I think of fire in connection with emotions because when you become stirred up, when your emotions control your actions, it affects not only yourself, but the people around you. Psychologists find that control of emotions can be gained by understanding the stimulus-response pattern. When you have certain experiences, you respond with various emotions. Stimulus response. Just as this sort of stimulus produces this sort of involuntary muscular response. Well, that's a rather simplified suggestion of a complex mental process, but you get the idea. Cause, effect. Nature endows us at birth with three general patterns of emotional response. Rage is the response to the primary stimulus of thwarting, something interfering with our behavior, our actions. Fear is the response to loud noises or loss of support. And the emotional response to love is usually the result of a show of affection or favors. And these seem to be the emotions with which we start life. Then as we grow up, many everyday things and social situations become associated with these primary stimuli, partly by a process called conditioning. And so many things and people cause us to respond emotionally. And in general, that's good, for there are many factors involved in a personality. And a balance of emotions is important to a well-rounded personality. But emotions out of control, well, let's take a look at a slice of everyday life to understand how some stimuli can bring about various emotional responses. What might happen to you, or to me, or to Jeffrey Moore? Jeff is an ordinary and healthy and well-balanced young fellow. He usually gets along well with people. And on this particular Friday afternoon, Jeff and his pals are discussing a big triple date tonight.
My dad's gonna let me have that car tonight.
Oh, the car? That's super. That sounds swell, Jeff, but, well, I don't know if I'll be able to go. I got quite a headache.
Got a headache, huh?
Yeah.
Well, how about letting Jeff, the old soda jerk, fix you up a snappy seltzer?
Okay. Hey, watch out. You're going some jerk.
Yeah. Okay, Bob. I saw the whole Y stunt. Now, just suppose you clean it up.
Go on, wise guy. Clean it up.
Yeah, it's right on the floor there. Look at the wash moving.
Wise guys, huh? Well, suppose I don't pick you up tonight. I got a darn good notion to let you guys walk to the park.
What got into him?
Gee, I don't know.
Why is Jeff angry? What's the stimulus that brings on this sudden emotional response of anger or mild rage? Well, it might be that Jeff feels thwarted as he fails in the fancy trick to impress his pals. So he gets mad at his pals. And now it's later than he thought. He tries a shortcut, hurrying to get home.
Great Scott, who in the world left that there? What a time to water the lawn.
Shortcuts often lead to trouble, and thus loss of emotional control. You've heard, haste makes waste. Jeff is frustrated by the sprinkler, but he asked for it. Of course, Jeff's going to get the car ready for the party tonight. He wouldn't really miss a chance to impress the gang. But, starter won't work. Again, his behavior is thwarted, and a habit is being developed. A habit of allowing such things to annoy him. Jeff's losing control of himself. His thinking is becoming muddled, and he's careless in his actions. The madder he gets, the worse it becomes. Did you ever hear anyone say, "I was so mad I couldn't see straight"? Severe emotional stress often decreases efficiency. See what I mean? And of course, it's the fault of the wrench. This is called projection. He's projecting the blame to the wrench. Well, we've seen Jeff lose control of himself in rage. Let's see how the rest of the family is doing.
Mother, oh, it's wonderful. I love the new dress you made.
Oh, thank you, Joan, dear.
See how the new dress tends to stimulate Joan's love for Mother? This makes both Mother and Joan happier. But how does it affect Jeff? And how does his anger affect the others?
Oh, you're the sweetest, bestest mother a girl ever had.
I'm glad you like the dress, Joan.
Oh, I'm so happy. I could be a model. Or a cover girl.
Hey, what's gotten into that crazy kid's sister?
Oh, Jeff, don't be that way.
Notice how Mother seems to become angry herself because of Jeff's anger. Perhaps she shouldn't, but anger is a violent emotion, and we often see an induction of behavior or spread of emotion to other persons, almost like a contagious disease.
Hi, Raj.
Hello, Jeff.
Say, what have you got? Well, that's my letter. Give me that.
Let me.
Why,
I got your
you
letter.
dirty little sneak. You gonna give me that letter? Are you gonna give it to me?
No.
I'll show you up.
Mother!
This dirty, sneaking brother, you gonna give me my letter?
Stop it!
Will you give me that letter? I'll teach you not to open my mail.
I didn't know about this! Stop it! Drop that coat hanger.
Sometimes rage, fear, and love are aroused together at the same time. Mother's love of her children and her fear for Roger's safety were mixed with anger, almost rage, at both boys for the part they played in the flare-up. Of course, Jeffrey's family didn't realize that he had been exposed to one irritating situation after another, an accumulation of stimuli which brought about an abnormally strong response. And what did this do to Jeff, this sort of uncontrolled emotional outburst? Well, he regrets some of the things he said, but he can't unsay them. He's tired. That feeling of fatigue may spoil a good time on his date tonight. And if this sort of flare-up is repeated often, it might lead to a permanently warped personality. What could Jeff do to keep better control? Well, we say he could, 1, eliminate the stimulus, 2, modify the stimulus, or 3, modify the response. With these 3 ideas in mind, let's examine Jeff's episode again. To control his emotions, Jeff eliminates the stimulus, the failure to impress his pals, by trying such fancy tricks only when he can do them successfully. But sometimes the trick fails. There are many times when you can't eliminate the stimulus. Try to modify the stimulus. Standing off and looking at himself, Jeff realizes that a slip like that won't really hurt his standing with the gang. Taking it all lightly as a good sport, Jeff impresses the gang a lot more than if he gets angry over such a little thing. It helps to recognize and understand the emotional patterns. Then it's easier to eliminate or modify the stimulus. And there's another, even more valuable way to control your emotions. Modify the response. Rather than get in the habit of getting angry, Jeff can substitute. He can modify his response by seeing the humor in the situation. What good does it do to get angry about this? When Jeff's in the habit of controlling his emotions, his thinking is straighter. Push the button. No starter. Let's see. Pull the light switch. No light. That means something. Reason it out. No horn either. So, must be a dead battery. That's straight thinking, unmuddled by emotional disturbances. And it's a simple thing to call the garage or someone for a push and a recharge. No need to fly off the handle and take it out on the things and the people around. When he tries to understand his emotions and those of people around him, Jeff has less trouble controlling himself, and he and those around him are happier. The more he exercises control of his emotional behavior, the easier it becomes to meet the next situation without losing control.
Oh, how about it? Either the plane or the letter.
And so it goes. A happier time all around when emotions are under control.
Hey, Raj, how about you help me get the car pushed out of the garage so we can get it started and fixed up for tonight? You know, if the car's running, I can drop you off the movies tonight before I go out.
Yes, by a better understanding of the emotional patterns of everyday life, and by knowing how you respond to various stimuli, you can develop better control by eliminating the stimulus, or by modifying the stimulus, or by modifying the response. You can control the fire of your emotions. You can balance your emotions and use them so that your personality becomes more pleasant. and you and those around you are a great deal happier and healthier.
I think I understand what you've been trying to tell me, Lazar. When I'm walking into the park, I know I'm going to come upon some places that are going to frighten me. I have two choices. Either avoid the park forever, which I can't because I love going there so much, or I must realize that the places that frighten me so much only frighten me because of what I think is in them, such as giant mutant beasts. There really aren't any such things. They are just something my mind made up. I have to push those fake thoughts out of my head, tell myself there are no such creatures, and march into those dark spots with confidence. I may not succeed the first time, or the second, or the third, but if I can keep facing my fears, as time passes, my mind will realize that there is nothing to be afraid of, and I'll be as used to being in the dark as I am in the light.
You've got it, Jingles. Control your fears. Don't let them control you.
I'm still scared to go outside alone, Lazar. For some reason, I can't get the image of that giant beast out of my head. Will you walk me home?
Sure, Jingles. I know you've had a scare tonight. I'd be happy to walk you home.
Lazar.
I know, Jingles. Sometimes there is nothing in the dark to be afraid of.
And sometimes there is.